Thank you very much, Ellie. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am sorry, given my low level of knowledge, I think, of the Greek language, I will have to speak English, and you will have to bear, I think, my French English this morning. First of all, I would like to thank GAIA, ΕΠΙΧΕΙΡΕΙΝ, I think, for the invitation and for giving me the opportunity today to speak about, I think, the role of the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, in modernizing the primary sector, both agriculture and forestry. And I have to say that this issue of modernization is absolutely essential, absolutely critical for making the farm sector and the forestry sector more sustainable, more competitive, more resilient, and this building on knowledge, building on innovation, and building on digitization. As you all know, I think, the CAP, I think the Common Agricultural Policy has been and continues to be a very successful policy, which has been increasingly called over the last 20 years to address and to meet various needs, various objectives, various policy initiatives, and I could name a few: food security, environment, climate, energy, territorial cohesion, bioeconomy. But I would say, despite all this success, the Commission has decided on the 1st of June of this year, of 2018, to put forward new proposals to adjust and to modify this policy framework for the period 2021-2027, so for the next period. So why do we propose again another reform? Basically, I would say for three key reasons. The first reason relates to the need for improving the effectiveness of this policy framework and the public policy to reach its common objectives, and common objective of supporting and developing a sustainable and competitive farm and forestry sector and supporting the development of rural areas. The second reason relates to the need to improve the contribution of the CAP and the contribution of agriculture to the new commitments of the EU and new commitments in relation, for instance, to the COP21 agreement, the climate change agreement of Paris, and also the sustainable development goals. And the third reason for introducing new changes in this policy relates to the need to address some specific weaknesses. Let's face it, the CAP is still a very complex policy. The CAP still lacks of targeting public support to the real needs, and the environmental performance of the CAP is still rather low. So in order to address these three key objectives, the Commission has identified four main priorities to adjust, I think, the policy framework. The first priority has already been identified, I think, and mentioned before in the previous intervention. So basically, four priorities in this new proposal to adjust, I think, the policy framework. The first priority relates to the need to modernize and simplify the policy, and this is meant to be achieved by introducing a new mechanism for delivering public support to the farm sector, farm and forestry sector. And this new mechanism will be based first on performance rather than on the mere respect of specific set of rules, so on the compliance. This new mechanism for delivering public support will also be based on a new partnership between the EU on one side and the member state, so that the action of the EU will be limited to ensure a strong common framework, and in this framework we will address the objectives of the policy, the main types of measures of intervention, and some basic requirements. And the member states will have the flexibility, the member states will have the subsidiarity to implement this common framework with much greater flexibility, but in line with the needs at local level, the needs at regional level, or the needs at national level. And all the member states' decision, all the member states' action in order to grant this public support will be described and embedded in what we have called in the Commission a CAP strategic plan that will have to be designed by each member state, and this strategic plan will be approved by the Commission. So the implementation and the performance of the strategic plan will be monitored and evaluated through a new performance framework and through the delivery of annual performance reports. And in this performance report, what we will have is that we will have a set of indicators that can allow us to assess the achievement or the progress towards quantified objective set in each plan. So this set of indicators and this strategic plan for us will represent in the future a kind of scoreboard through which we will monitor the implementation of the policy and to what extent the policy is achieving the objective. The second priority of this new CAP, or this proposal for a future CAP, relates to the need to enhance the environmental and climate performance of the CAP, but of course of the farm and forestry sector. And this is not only an issue, I think, of environment, it is an issue, I think, of food security. If we are to ensure food security of the EU in 2030 or 2040, we need to address the problem of the degradation of natural resources, which are at the basis, I think, of production. And when I talk about natural resources, I talk about soil, I talk about water, I talk about air, and I talk about biodiversity. We need also to raise the level of, I would say, of our fight, of our battle against climate change. We already this morning talked about mitigation, and that the farm sector and the forestry sector have a very significant and interesting contribution to make to decarbonize the EU society and the economy. But it's also an issue of adaptation. We need to support and encourage farmers to adapt their production methods in order to adapt to the climate change. And for this, we have proposed a new green architecture that would replace the current system, which is rather complex, and a new green architecture that will be based on two pillars. On one side, what we call an enhanced conditionality, list of standards and some legal requirements that farmers have to respect, all farmers across the EU. And this first part, enhanced conditionality, will be complemented by voluntary measures in the first pillar, but also in the second pillar. The third priority that we are pushing and encouraging in this new CAP relates to the development of innovation and the development of a knowledge-based primary sector in order to optimize the use of the wealth of all this new knowledge which is now available. And it's not only an issue of digitalization, artificial intelligence, etc. It's also a lot of new knowledge related to agronomy, to zootechny, to business model. And it is very important that in the future, we increase the level of support for knowledge creation and knowledge use, for training, for advisory services, for the use of new technologies, digitization, which are absolutely key when it comes to talk about competitiveness and when it comes to talk to sustainability. So in a nutshell, what we are trying to achieve with the new CAP proposal is a simpler policy framework. It is a more strategic policy approach. It's a more effective policy, future policy framework for the CAP, delivering results for you, for farmers, but also delivering results for the citizens of the EU. So now I would like to turn to digitization and the role of digitization and new technologies, I think, for the farm sector. And I will start, I think, with the production sector. It is absolutely crucial to promote the digitization and the use of new technologies in the farm sector because they represent, in our view, a very powerful tool for improving the sustainability and the competitiveness of the farm and forestry sector. The primary sector is already and will keep changing in the future very significantly with the availability and the multiplication of modern technologies accompanied by smart devices with very increased intelligence, autonomous behavior, and connectivity. But I have to say that, and I would like to underline that the agricultural production sector is already relatively well advanced in using digital technologies. It is already making advantage of the European Global Navigation Satellite System, what we call the GNSS, and also Earth observation technologies and the Internet of Things. I would like just to name a few of these systems. Galileo, which is the European alternative to the GPS, which is extremely important for smart and precision farming, and important also for agri-logistics. I could name also EGNOS, which is extremely important in order to augment the accuracy, which is crucial, I think, for precision farming and smart farming in remote areas. I could also talk about the Earth observation program called Galileo, which is providing a lot of data and services that we are increasingly using for policy purposes, but for the farmer. I have to say, on farms, digital technologies will help respond to citizens' demand for greater quality and for also greater environmental performance. And I will just mention an example, I think, about the state of soil and plant. By helping to assess the precise and exact state of soil and the plant, precision farming using these technologies will help decrease water consumption, will help optimize nutrient management, and at the end of the day also optimize, I think, the use of chemicals, so achieving both greater environmental performance but also representing economic benefit for the farmer. In the same vein, the use of sensors can also improve animal welfare by continuously recording and evaluating health parameters of livestock and allowing to act in case of problems and allowing to use less antimicrobials in the livestock sector. And I have to say that for all these new technologies, the EU, and in particular the Common Agricultural Policy, has a key role to play to enable that these technologies contribute to the optimization of the production process, to increase the sustainability of the agricultural production system, to increase the competitiveness, increase investment, jobs, increase growth, and in particular in rural areas. This was for the production side. On the policy side, we are also progressing and advancing quite substantially. The public administration for agricultural policy, for the CAP, at EU level but also at national level, is also going through a very significant transformation through digital technologies. The recent boost in availability of these technologies and the willingness to implement them in the short term and also in the medium term is already allowing us to streamline, to rationalize the administration and the control processes, and so it is allowing to make the CAP simpler, more modern, and more closer to the needs of farmers and to the needs of citizens. The current CAP is already making use of digital technologies and data, notably through the Earth observation program called Copernicus and through its Sentinel sensors, and this allows to better demonstrate the policy performance. This allows also to respond more promptly, more quickly to environmental challenges, to climatic challenges, and also to the economic challenges that the farm sector will encompass. With regard to research and innovation in new technology, it is important to underline that this digitization needs a lot of investment. And here I would like to underline, to mention that the services of the Commission, DG Agri, but in connection also with the services in charge of digitization, are currently investing more than 140 million euro for the next 3 years to support research, to test alternative approaches, but aim at accelerating the uptake of this digital technology in the farm sector, and that aim at developing also the sustainability of the farming sector through digital solutions. So all this may sound, I think, very nice in theory, conceptually, and very rosy, but there are some key challenges, some main difficulties that we need to address and that we need to overcome. I would like to mention 3 of these difficulties and areas where we need to intervene in order to support best, I think, the farm sector and to support, I think, the full use of digitalization. The first key challenge is to support the uptake by farmers and by rural communities of digital technologies. We also need to develop solutions which are based on existing but also on new technologies. And finally, we need to deal with the impact of new technologies and digitization on society. To ensure the uptake by farmers and by rural communities of digital technologies, there's a need to boost digital skills. There's a need to address the risk of digital divide, and it's not only a divide regarding digitalization. It is, at the end of the day, a divide regarding economic opportunities for farmers and for rural economies. We need to enhance our support to advisors because they will be the first one to facilitate the implementation of digital technologies, and we need to invest in rural infrastructure. We also need to develop new technological solutions. We see currently in many parts, I think, of the EU and maybe also in Greece, that a lot of new technologies are being taken up and used, but by large farmers very often, so by a small number of farmers. We need to address and to see to what extent we can bring all farmers, and in particular the small farmers on board, and we need to design specific, tailor-made solution for these small farmers. There's a necessity also to look at the impact of digital technologies on the society itself, emphasizing the positive effect and trying to mitigate the negative impact of these technologies. And this is why we're also reflecting about the best way to tackle issues like data ownership. With digital technologies, a lot of new data are being developed. Who do they belong to? Farmers, companies, public sector. We need to address this issue of data ownership, data analysis, data availability. We need also to look at the potential consequences of data misuse by any kind of stakeholders. We need to adapt advisory services to this dynamic environment and also address more generally issues related to information management and what I would call the EU-wide farmer-centric information. I would like to finalize my intervention by mentioning a few ongoing actions in the field of digital agriculture and use of new technologies. My first example will relate, I think, to what we have recently introduced, which is called a check by monitoring. That means control by monitoring. It is a new alternative which has been introduced by the Commission as an option for member states to undertake the famous control on the field and to replace them by control by monitoring, which is an approach which is based primarily on Earth observation from Copernicus satellite, and that allow to monitor best the activities and the use which is made of the land and on all parcels at EU level and on a very frequent way, since we have information on each parcel in the EU every 5 days. So these techniques of check by monitoring could allow us, and I hope will, over the whole EU, allow us to replace the traditional on-the-spot check control. It will also allow to have a much more efficient processing of aid application. It will mean less costly field visit, less time spent by farmers with inspectors on the land, less stress, but also less risk of incurring financial penalties, I think, for farmers where some errors have been introduced in the aid application. Second example I would like to mention, I will try to be brief, is what we have introduced in the context of the future CAP and in the context of the enhanced conditionality. We have introduced a proposal to oblige farmers to use what we call a new farm sustainability tool for nutrients. This tool represents, in fact, a kind of online or mobile application that will help farmers create their own user-friendly nutrient management plan and to achieve both economic and environmental benefits, I think, on the farm. This is a tool that we are designing in order to ensure an open source modularity, so a tool that can integrate a lot of different data not only on nutrient management, but information regarding the use of land, information regarding irrigation, information regarding chemical treatment, carbon accounting, etc. So for us, it's a kind of entry gate, it's a kind of catalyst application, but we would like to introduce on a mandatory basis for farmers, and that could give rise, and that could be attract afterwards, further development in terms of application of on-farm innovation and digitization system. Two last words regarding the broadband competence offices, which have been developed at the end of last year, and which are meant to advise local authorities, regional authorities, telecom operators, private and public stakeholders on ways to develop broadband connectivity in rural area in order to help businesses, farmers, primary sectors, but also citizens to have better access to internet. A word also on the EU action plan for smart villages, which focuses on ways to revitalize rural services through digital solution and through social innovation, and this concerns health, social services, education. So it's a way of using the digital technologies, not only for the primary sector, but also for the rural economy, creating new opportunities in these rural areas. So to conclude, I would like to underline that the future CAP, but also all these different initiatives that I have mentioned, coming from the public sector or the private sector, should contribute to foster and to share knowledge, innovation, digitization in agriculture, which is absolutely fundamental. And everybody has said that this morning, but I think I would like to insist on that, which is absolutely fundamental and crucial if we are to achieve better competitiveness, better sustainability, and better resilience from the farm and the forestry sector. And in this context, I would like to recall that in the future CAP proposal, Member States, if they are adopted, Member States will be obliged in the strategic plan to explain the manner by which they will support modernization, innovation, uptake of new technologies, and digital-based opportunities in the farm and forestry sector. And they will be also obliged to mention precisely how they intend to support the development of digital infrastructure in rural areas in order to make them more competitive, more sustainable, but also and primarily more attractive for economic businesses. Thank you for listening.